Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on season two of Path to the Pros. For those of you just tuning in, this is a podcast series where I sit down with some of the most talented and successful execs in sports and entertainment, learning about their journeys so far, path to success, and hot industry topics as well. Today, I'm sat with Jeff Price, the Chief Commercial Officer of the PGA of America. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
So glad to be with you and looking forward to the conversation.
Brilliant. Jeff, question I always love to kick these things off with. Would love to know, taking us way back when, how did you first get into sports and what was your pathway into the industry?
Sure. Well, I started as an athlete, growing up in high school, was a quarterback, played basketball as well, and then went to D3 Bates College and played college football. Had more injuries probably than time on the field, but had a great experience. And from there, kind of realized that the sports industry was a path that I wanted to pursue, and made the decision that going to the University of Massachusetts and there's the Mark McCormick Sport Management Program was going to be a path that would open doorways. I had sent letters for internships the summer after I graduated Bates and got rejected by every sports organization you could think of. And I still hold those rejection letters in a folder to remind me that it's tough to get into this industry. But through UMass and the growth and development, and then the door opened to an internship at the NBA coming out of UMass. And so my path was through education. And I think over the course of time, my career has really been driven by mentor and mentee relationships. My first mentor was my football coach, Jim Fitzgerald, who really kind of pushed me to think about what was possible, not just in the game of football, but in life, and was a great mentor kind of in those formative years. When I got to UMass, Professor Glenn Wong was a wonderful mentor. Had an opportunity to work with him, work on some of his textbooks, and be a graduate assistant to him. And he's been a lifelong friend and a mentor for many, many years as I've tried to leverage his expertise. Got to the NBA and was fortunate to have an individual by the name of Rick Welts, who you probably know well, who went on to Golden State Warrior fame. And Rick was really helpful in making sure that, a kid from New Hampshire had an opportunity in New York kind of out of the gates, and looked at that and made sure that, that relationship really helped to springboard a long-term future. And I got to Gatorade leaving the NBA, and Sue Wellington, who was running the brand, really gave me my MBA in brand marketing. And so I think the importance of mentors and mentee relationships, kind of as I've gone on, it's been a key point of focus, because I think I learn as much from the mentees that I'm working with now as being the mentor. And so that was a key path to helping me open doors, understand kind of what opportunities exist, and taking advantage of those relationships in a meaningful, back and forth, I think was kind of key to opening the doors and to where I've gotten to today at the PGA of America.
Nice. I hear that so much in the industry. That mentor-mentee relationship, unlocking and developing those relationships at such an early point of your career, and how important that is to ultimately support you further down the line. As you make a move from one business to another, you've come from the NBA, you've moved on from there, you're now at the PGA of America. Sounds like quite the journey. What are some of the kind of biggest achievements, most notable successes and success stories that you've had over the the tenure of your career so far?
Sure. I'll just point to a few of them. I'll start at the NBA. I was fortunate to work for 3 years with Bob Lanier, Big Bob, size 22. Fortunately, recently passed away, but wonderful human being. And he led the Stay in School program. And to see the impact that players could have on the lives of students. And we would go to middle schools and elementary schools in Orlando and in Charlotte and other all-star cities. And to see the impact that those players could have and how that Stay in School program created unity in communities was probably one of the first things that I was really proud to be a part of. And, have that learning opportunity while growing early in my career to also see the impact that it was having. That Stay in School program has always stuck with me as something that very, very proud of, and certainly proud of the work that Bob and the players did engaging in their communities. I think about, my time at MasterCard. We put together the All-Century team with Major League Baseball. Nice. And that celebration and that engagement at Fenway Park the All-Star game still brings me chills thinking about Ted Williams and all of the players gathering in Fenway Park, and all that meant to the game of baseball. And that celebration was certainly something that was incredibly meaningful to baseball fans, and amazingly positive for the MasterCard brand and the relationship with baseball, which we signed the deal in '97. It still exists today. And so longevity of activations like that, certainly paying dividends. And then I think back to just a couple of years ago in COVID, working with our PGA professionals to lead back to golf. And if you think about kind of the risks that COVID presented in terms of the golf industry being shut down for 90 days in most states, we took the initiative with our pros to be part of the solution. And golf was one of the first sports back. And you've seen the numbers now, the boom that came out of COVID into golf participation at the grassroots level. It's really credit to our professionals who were on the front lines, making sure that golf was part of the fun, part of the way that people could recreate, and it's paying dividends, years later as we continue to grow as a sport. So those are a few of the things that I've been really fortunate to work with great brands, with great people, and great teams that made all of those things happen. And there's many others, but those are three that certainly come to mind.
Nice. Some great stories in there. And I'm guessing that this may have come through one of those stories. It may have been at a different point, but I always like to ask the question around that first kind of pinch me moment, right? Because the time and investment and efforts that it takes to try and break into the industry, right? You have the hours of applying to jobs, of networking, of attending events, of really doing everything that you can to try and ultimately set you up to work in the industry. But all of that hard work is then kind of paid off through the reward of getting in, right? And then once you're in, that's where the real groundwork and the legwork starts. When would you say you had that real kind of first pinch me moment where you looked around and you were just, wow, okay, this is my job. I'm getting paid to do this right now?
There's a very simple one, and for those that know David Stern, former commissioner of the NBA, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, an incredible leader. Certainly changed the nature of basketball through his leadership, made it the international game that it is today. But I will never forget being in the office early in my tenure on a Saturday, and David was a workaholic and loved to be on the job 24/7. And so it's a Saturday afternoon, I'm in my cubicle doing some work, preparing for, I think, the Stay in School program and the event that we had coming. And David walked by and put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, he would call me New Hampshire boy. There's a story to that, but he said, New Hampshire boy, I'm glad you're here on Saturday because I probably wouldn't have invited you back on Sunday. And so, that moment was like, the commissioner of the NBA knows who I am and is saying, hey, you come back tomorrow, Sunday, you probably will have a future here. So that was the moment when I realized, like, wow, this is real, and I'm a part of a great industry.
Yeah. I always find it interesting just learning about that kind of first moment, that first realization of, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm in. I'm in with the big boys. This is where really the fun begins. You've obviously had a great career so far, Jeff. I know it takes a lot to not only spend an entire career in sales and sales leadership, but to do it for one organization for the tenure that you have in the PGA of America is obviously an incredible feat. Can you talk to us about some of your, I guess, secrets to success or sales processes, sales strategies that, for the people listening can hear about and learn about when it comes to sales in what is arguably one of the most competitive industries in the world?
Yeah, so let me start maybe one step back, and then I'll get into the sales process. But I think, for anyone who's trying to enter into the sports industry, I think it's really important that the job and opportunity that you have, you put your full energy into doing that job the best that you can. There's a lot of talk about the importance of networking and the importance of building those relationships, which I fully endorse. But I think fundamentally to start, it's the opportunity that you have being the best you can be at the role that you have and being the best teammate you can be with those that you work with. Put in the effort, make sure the opportunity is there. I think that spans all aspects of careers in sport. We're fortunate this isn't a job. It's a career that you wake up every day feeling fortunate, to your point, to be a part of an amazing industry that gives people enjoyment. It's fun. It's certainly something that is a big business, and I'll get to the business piece of it. But you have to understand that there are many, many people who want the seat that you're in. So when you're in that seat, do the best that you can possibly do. Ask the right questions. Grow through that. I didn't start in sales. I started as a PR intern at the NBA. But over the course of time, going on the brand side and experiencing brand and sports marketing at Gatorade and MasterCard, as I evolved and got to Sports Illustrated, all of a sudden I understood what the person in the other seat was thinking about and worrying about. And I think what has made my career on the other side of the table, doing commercial deals, doing whether those are television deals, sponsorship deals, partnership deals, the foundation work that we do to impact lives through golf, it starts by understanding and asking the right questions of who you're wanting to be in business with. We're fortunate at the PGA of America that Seth Waugh kind of has one very clear point as it relates to partnerships. We want to be the best partner of each of the companies that we work with that they have in their portfolio. And that means not having a cookie cutter approach to commercial relationships. It's understanding in category A versus category B, what is important and how do we have a mutually beneficial relationship. So I think it starts with really good listening and asking great questions to be able to bring the right deals forward, to find the partners who understand. For the PGA of America, we represent 28,000 men and women who are on the front lines of golf every day, taking consumers on a golf journey for a lifetime. We're, as that trade association, we have to focus on that and that mission while we have some of the most amazing assets in golf with the Ryder Cup and the PGA Championship, the upcoming KPMG Women's PGA Championship, the KitchenAid Senior Championship, all those relationships, those brands, each of them have a different point of emphasis of why they want to be associated with us. And for us, how do they help to amplify what our 28,000 men and women do?
It's a great story for you guys to have. And I think I speak to so many people and have a lot of conversations around pioneering deals, right? This is the first of this type of deal that's ever been done in the industry, or we're the first NBA team to go out and unlock this new category or find a new business within a new category. All of that stuff, I think, makes for memorable partnerships and memorable people that are involved in those partnerships. As you know, the reality is that those deals and those types of deals aren't done very often. They're done maybe once in a career, maybe a couple of times in a career. When it comes to those, the year on year, the usual, the run of the mill type deals, what would you say are the kind of key components to ensuring that you're not only listening to what the brand is looking for, answering some of those questions as to what they need and finding the right solution to them, but also getting what's best for your business? Because I think it's a two-way approach, right? There's almost a bargaining element, if you like, a push and pull type of conversation that happens. And sometimes it can go either way, right? But trying to find that middle ground, that sweet spot, is often where people find a lot of challenges. So what's your kind of verdict and I guess advice that you may have there for people that are in those situations where they're trying to get the best of both worlds?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it starts by really understanding the value that your property, your asset can bring to any company, right? We know that the grassroots side of our organization and the ability to connect with the 41 million people who now play the game of golf in the United States, off course and on course, that's a very valuable audience that we want to help our partners connect with and leverage. When you have marquee events like the PGA Championship, the KPMG, and the Ryder Cup, thinking about the value that those can bring and how do you create connectivity and differentiation based on a brand's objectives. What an alcohol brand is going to look to do in this space is very different than what our partners at Rolex are looking to do. And so I still think it comes down to knowing the value that you will bring. How do you maximize that value for the partner? And how do you get the partner to understand what they can do, both financially, but if a deal is financial only, I think those are the deals that become transactional and they are more likely to fail. If you can take the financial elements of success and tie it to something that's going to move both businesses forward with an engaging experience, whether it's B2B or B2C, it really then has something that can sustain for years. We're thrilled that we've been partners with Pepsi for over 30 years. That deal doesn't look the same as it was when I was at Gatorade and it started. But
Right.
what we've done is listen to each other in year in and year out. And what Pepsi's been able to do is grow their share at the golf facilities, the 15,000 facilities across the country. Their share has gone up exponentially because that's a priority that we work with them on. We've been over 25 years with Club Car and how they've grown their market share and their engagement. And so we look for longevity in deals. And I think if you only focus on the financials, those are going to become transactional. When you focus on the revenue and the real sustainability of what you do to drive businesses forward, and whatever the return on investment or return on objectives are for both companies, you're aligned at those. Those are the deals that sustain. And I think that's the approach that we try to take at the PGA of America.
And that's a sweet spot, isn't it? It's finding that middle ground and making sure that you've listened, but at the same time you're going back and your boss has given you a pat on the back when you walk through the office after you closed out the meeting. So cool, interesting. And one of the, I guess, just as salespeople in general, right? I think, at least in my experience, the biggest challenges I face and the partnerships folks that I often speak with, the biggest challenges that they come across are typically either competitors. There are often complications around types of deals that can be done versus, agreements that are in place with other entities and what can and can't work out. The PGA of America is obviously, a world-renowned brand and an organization that I'm sure there are tons and tons of brands that want to work with you guys and partner with you guys. What are the challenges that you face? Because, and correct me if I'm mistaken, Jeff, but I wouldn't say that the challenge is attracting these businesses. It's probably just trying to find the right thing for them, if that makes sense. But would love to get your verdict on, some of the challenges that you faced over your tenure so far and where people could potentially overcome those challenges that are in similar positions.
Yeah. So look, the PGA of America and the PGA Tour were one organization up until 1968. And when the tour separated and wanted to focus on tour professionals and the game that we watch on television each week in and week out, they moved up to Ponte Vedra and built a separate business. And we are still have a close working relationship, but we are two separate organizations. So if you think about golf overall, the confusion between PGA of America, PGA Tour, and then the other governing bodies, there's no singular entity in the world that runs golf. There are multiple organizations that we all have our own kind of place in the ecosystem. And so I think the first challenge that we have is making sure that the companies that we want to do business with understand who the PGA of America is, understand what our PGA professionals do, and understand the scope of the assets that we have that allow us, as Seth likes to say, most folks have a lane in the pool of golf, in the swimming pool of golf. We kind of play in the entire pool. And the ability to leverage that is really important. So I think wherever you are and whatever kind of your commercial role is, it's important that you can get to the essence of who you are, what you represent, and the opportunity that creates for the partner that you're talking to. So I think it's always really important that you've done the research, you understand the nuances of who you're speaking with, understand the nuances of what influences are happening on their business at that moment in time, and how can you turn that research, that understanding, into the opportunity that you're bringing a solution that individual or company may never have thought of. And I think that is certainly for us, understanding a complicated landscape, making it clear and simple, and the opportunities that we represent, we think are very differentiated in the game of golf. But that isn't enough. It's then to the partners, what is it that swimming pool that we have can do to create success for them? And if you look across our portfolio, we've got some amazing brands. Each one of them is leveraging their relationship with the PGA of America in very different ways. And I think a portfolio of partners that help you get better, help your bottom line get better, but also help your brand, help your mission, is critical. And again, I said it, but the other piece that gets really important is that when you do a deal, we're fortunate to have an amazing partnership team that manages those relationships. And our renewal rate of over 80% of all of our partners in deals over the last 15 years, I think is a complement to getting the right deal done on the upfront, but then managing the relationship. And those have to be two-way street conversations. There are things that brands are going to ask for that we're unable to do, but let's come up with a solution that solves for what they're trying to accomplish. And so I think the sales process and the partnership management process working hand in hand and being the best partner you can be is how you sustain success for the long term.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think I guess the long and short of it there, guys, is understanding exactly what the partners and businesses that are interested in doing business are looking for, finding the right things, differentiating. I think you didn't quite use the phrase, but I think a lot of what you were saying there, Jeff, leads to storytelling, right? Taking them through that journey, taking them through that experience of this is what life will be like, partnering with the PGA of America. Here's what we can do for you. Here's what visibility that produces for you, and that brand awareness. So very valuable, very, very useful information for those in similar positions.
And then the last point is, if you're going to be in this category and in this industry for the long term, it is really important to build relationships. I said at the beginning, I'm not a fan of just kind of spray networking, but as you do the work and you build the relationships, people are going to move. They're going to go to different places and to different brands. And if you've treated those individuals well, you may not agree or align on everything, but you've done the work, you've engaged the partner, that you've built a relationship and there's trust there. Those relationships will pay dividends in the long term. There's the analytics of deals, there's the ROI on deals, and obviously there's a much greater crunching of numbers and what the return on deals look like today than probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It is still important that people have to make decisions, and people want to do business with people that they trust, with people that they know are going to do what they say they're going to do, and that they have shown over time to work closely with the partner to understand the two-way street that you build. And so building those relationships and then continuing to nurture them over time pays dividends. And when you have a tough conversation, it's much easier to have the tough conversation with someone you built that relationship with than a brand just kind of calling out of the blue. And I'll tell one quick story to kind of exemplify that. In COVID, a lot of companies ended up turning conversations over to their lawyers and finance team. What Seth told us to do is, look, partners are your responsibility. Our team, you own them. And so you're going to have the conversations. We'll work closely with finance and legal, but introducing somebody that doesn't have the relationship in times of stress only creates more stress. So I think the idea that you've built those relationships, and when hard conversations and tough conversations have to happen, you're ready for them, and there's a level of trust and engagement that will help you find common ground.
It's something that it's no surprise that more or less every sales brief that I take in the role that I sit, 90 to 95% of the time, one of the main criteria or requirements of that search is someone who has a good Rolodex of contacts within a certain area. So it goes without saying, for anyone who's listening, to really take on board and kind of hone in on that, build those relationships at an early phase. They're going to help you to develop your career further down the line. I think one biggest thing that I took from a mentor a couple of years back, as I was first transitioning into sports, was don't just call people or reach out to people when you want something from them. Be there when they're going through a difficult time. A good friend of mine, C-suite executive, moved on from a role that he was in at the time. We stayed in touch for the 6 to 7 months that he was out of work for, and through that relationship, we were then able to continue to work with him when he moved into his new role. So, live examples there, and Jeff, I think your example there is a great one. During a pandemic, everything's up in the air. People don't know how to react. People don't know what to do. And the first port of call, usually in those situations, is, okay, legally, what can and what can't we do? So to have that relationship and to be able to leverage that relationship to, give you guys at the PGA of America an upper hand and a bit of an advantage against others, I think is essential, and what kind of goes a long way from that initial relationship that was developed. There's one last topic, question, I should say, Jeff, that I'd like to ask, just on the sales side. Going from I think sales, hands-on sales, being a sales professional yourself, to sales leadership, where you're managing, leading, and running teams, is a huge transition. I speak to a lot of people that are in those individual contributory roles, and they're looking for that step up into management. Now, one thing I've learned personally, and from the people that I've seen, that I work with, not every great salesperson is a great sales leader, and vice versa, right? Not every sales leader is a great salesperson as well. In your experience, and given the track record that you have, Jeff, what do you think are the key things and aspects that people need to think about and take into account when they are making that jump from salesperson to sales leader?
Great question, and certainly something that I've made some mistakes over the course of time. So I'm going to take this from a learning perspective. I think the first thing when you transition is that you realize you have to empower your team. Right? You go from the individual contributor and you're used to closing deals. And that becomes a focal point of you got to try and close every deal.
Yeah.
I think making yourself a leader of the team and understanding what are your various teammates, where are they in their own journey? Some people may need help closing, right? They may be great at opening a door, but they can't close. So with that teammate, you're going to help them get it across the finish line. Some may be amazing at the relationship side, but in trying to actually structure what a deal looks like, they need help on that component. And so yeah. I think the first step is understanding and taking a step back to look at the team that you're leading and where do you, it's kind of like I think of it from a coach in a basketball team, right? You've got 12 players that all play different roles, and the coach needs to know when to put certain players in, when to accelerate the skills of a player, when to give a player a kick in the butt to get moving forward. I think it's very similar in leading a sales organization. And then the second thing I would say, and it goes back to my point about the connectivity between sales and then partner management. I'm fortunate that I oversee both. And I think it's important that if you're going to have a group of folks that are bringing new business in, and then it's handed off to a team to manage, and in our case, focus on the renewals, I think the connectivity of that team to make sure that when somebody's out making promises that this organization is going to deliver, you have the ability to make sure the deal is doable, but it's actionable and it's done in a way that matches up to what was sold on the front end. That can be the biggest challenge within organizations is sales is one thing, and it all of a sudden changes when it gets across to the partner team. I think having the ability to make sure there's clarity on roles, responsibilities, and living up to what you've said you're going to do is really important. So I think about that in my role of let's make sure it's the right deal, make sure we've got the right team to support the deal, and that there's clarity going in that this is how we're going to make sure this deal gets renewed. And so those, I think, are the key points in transitioning. It's how do you leverage your team? How do you make your team as successful as possible? And how do you make sure the team relationship between the development side and the management side is one that fosters long-term relationships? And if I were to give the kind of thoughts, those are the things that I've probably made more mistakes on, but have learned. And then again, I think asking the right questions as a leader is an important piece. You don't always necessarily have to dictate everything. Ask the team what's missing. How do we recalibrate what we're doing, and get that feedback so that it's not just my way or the highway, it's our way. And you do it as a team.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that towards the end there. I heard a quote. I always forget the person who said this, but I'll drop a comment in the in this post. But a good leader doesn't always have the right answers, but always asks the right questions. And I think that's it hones so true in testament to what you're saying there, that asking those right questions. And the other point that you mentioned, or the few points that you mentioned, I think the clear resonating factor in all of that for me was communication, right? Communicating to your team, understanding where they're at and what they need to do to develop, and how are they progressing as individuals and as salespeople. Are they communicating to some of the other areas internally as well as externally? I think that's one thing that often gets overlooked when you're managing and leading a team is, okay, great, you're speaking to all the right people and doing business development in the way that you should be, but internally, who's got buy-in? Who has your buy-in? Who are you going to be able to lean on to say, hey man, I need a hand with this. I need you to jump in and help me out. And without that internal relationship, that's a very difficult conversation to have. So
I always talk about 3 C's. You've got to have great communication. Absolutely critically important that you have to be able to focus there. You have to have consideration, right? People have very different kind of perspectives, and the consideration of all parties that you work with as a leader is really important, and that leads to a great culture. If you have the consideration and you have the communication, the hope is you're going to have a great culture, and it's a team culture, a we culture versus an us versus them. And as a leader, you have to be the one to try and lead that. And I think that's again, just thinking about it as going from that individual contributor to leading an organization, those are the things that are the toughest, right? Those are the things you have to spend, not the deals necessarily. It's all of that together that sets up for successful deals time and again.
Right, exactly that. Great. And look, a couple of I guess questions just on the PGA of America. And there's one point that you touched on in a little earlier in our discussion, Jeff. Lots of confusion naturally in the marketplace between the PGA of America and the PGA Tour. For those that don't know the difference, and this was me included, we sat down for lunch about a year or so ago when I just moved over to New York, and you dived into the kind of structure and the differences between the two businesses. And I think for most people, they don't realize that there are two entities. Could you just give us the rundown on the difference between those two businesses and make it as simple as possible for those like me who are on the outside to understand?
The simplest way to think about it is, if you're playing the game of golf and going to a golf facility on course, off course, more likely than not, those 28,000 men and women that I talked about, the golf professionals working in the industry, are going to be the ones that make golf fun for you. They're going to be the ones that help coach you, help you in the events that you participate in, take you on that journey for a lifetime. And they are kind of key individuals and leaders in their local communities. Michael Block, I referenced earlier, he's in Southern California. He's an amazing coach who also happens to be an amazing player, but he's a member of the PGA of America. When he was playing on Sunday, when he hit the hole-in-one, he was playing with Rory McIlroy, who's a member, leader of the PGA Tour, who's a touring professional who you watch on television. We were so fortunate to have Michael be able to do both. But when he finishes, he's going back to Southern California, elevating the game, engaging with his customers, and those 28,000 men and women are doing that every day. We think about growing the game. We think about impacting lives through golf, through our foundation in areas like veterans and youth, making sure the game is more welcoming and inclusive for all. And that is who the PGA of America is. We love watching those players on Saturday and Sunday on television. We're fortunate at the PGA Championship that Michael was there on Sunday and qualified to come back next year. An amazing story. Michael's a member of the PGA of America. Rory's a member of the PGA Tour. Both important parts of the ecosystem, but for us, our mission and our members are our focal point. And if you're going to have fun in the game, a PGA of America coach is probably going to be the one to make that happen.
Nice. There you have it. Last question I want to leave you with, Jeff. What's next for the PGA of America? What have we got to look forward to?
So, great question. Starting on Monday, we'll be in New Jersey at Baltusrol Country Club for the KPMG Women's PGA Championship. So thrilled that we and KPMG and the LPGA and NBC Sports have worked together for the better part of a decade to elevate the women's game. Obviously, women's sports is on an incredible run across all sports, and we're certainly seeing it in golf. And we can't wait for that event next week, our final PGA Championship of the year, and the first major being played on the new Baltusrol course that was designed by Gil Hodge. So an amazing week next week in women's golf, and please tune in if you're able to watch on NBC and the Golf Channel and Peacock. And then in the fall, what I think the most amazing event in golf, the Ryder Cup, will be in Rome, and we will be there with a very competitive team. Zach Johnson is working very hard as our captain to get the team prepared, and we've not won in Europe in 30 years. So for us, a win on foreign soil would be fantastic. And then every day, as I said, our professionals are waking up leading the game, growing the game, changing lives and impacting lives. And we're going to do that 365 days a year. And so what's next for us is making sure that our mission, we're 107 years old today. For another 100 years, the PGA of America is a perpetual institution that needs to focus on growing the game. And we do that by serving 28,000 men and women.
Nice. Love it. Love it. There you have it, guys. Jeff, thank you so much for the advice, for the experience that you're able to share with everyone. I think so many people can take a lot from this. You know, whether you're earlier on in your career and, you know, thinking about getting into sports, you can think back to, you know, Jeff in his earlier days of the resume updating and the job applications, and save them all in a folder, because one day you'll look back and you know, you'll realize it was all worth it in the end. For anyone who's interested in opportunities at the PGA of America, knowing Jeff personally, I know he's a great guy and would be more than happy to have a conversation, or at least point you in the right direction if that's something that you're interested in. And yeah, look, it's been a great session. Really enjoyed sitting down, Jeff, and thanks so much for your time.